is 9/11 freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am your host, Andy Steele, and tonight the guest is Dave Meiswinkle. Dave Meiswinkle is the co-host of Quantum Matrix Radio, which is on every Monday here on No Lies Radio. He's also a criminal defense attorney. He's a former law enforcement officer, and he's a reporter, too. So he wears many hats, and on this show tonight, he's going to be talking about 9/11 truth, some 9/11 controlled demolition information, and also some other things related to 9/11 truth, which we don't normally get into on this show. Of course, the show just focuses on the scientific evidence proving that buildings 1, 2, and 7 of the World Trade Center complex were brought down in controlled demolitions on September 11th. We cover that because that's what AE 9/11 Truth covers. The show's done to promote AE 9/11 Truth. So I just want to reiterate, the opinions expressed on this show are those of the guests and don't necessarily reflect those of AE, but it's interesting to listen to, and we get into a discussion tonight about the new technological world, all these avenues of communication that we use, Google, Facebook, YouTube, and how reliant we are getting on these things. I know that a lot of people who, most of their day is spent on Facebook. I don't have a Facebook, thank God. I'm not into that whole scene there, but people are using these things to communicate. How does that affect us? Why do we need these things? And what responsibilities do these entities have for maintaining freedom of speech? So interesting discussion. Like I said, I'll be playing that for you in just a minute. So we are just a few days away from the AIA resolution vote. Of course, the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, is going to be voting on a resolution in which they will call for a new investigation into the destruction of World Trade Center 7 on 9/11. Not necessarily even saying that it's a controlled demolition, just saying, hey, there's some questions about this many architects have. We need a new investigation. That vote is scheduled in a few days from when this show airs, so we're going to try to send our good, positive vibes towards that, and hopefully next week we'll be able to report on the good news that vote did pass. And even if it didn't, we're reaching new milestones all of the time, and we'll just come back next year for another round. So lots of hard work being done at AE 9/11 Truth by the great people there. Ted Walter, Kelly David, so many of the other volunteers on this show that I've interviewed in the past. Just keep on coming. All right, they don't know it's a darn show. They think it's a darn fight, and it is a fight. It's a fight for the future of America, for intellectual freedom, for the ability, the freedom, the liberty to say 2 + 2 = 4, not 5. All right, because the 2 + 2 = 5 argument that we've been getting shoved down our throats by this government with the 9/11 official story has not done us any good, and continues to dig us deeper and deeper into the hole as a nation. So we got to reverse the course, and this is the first step towards doing that. Actually, I shouldn't even say the first step. It's probably the 5th or 6th step. A lot of people have been making those first steps over the years, planting the seeds and talking about this information. So very, very good stuff going on here. And I just want to thank all of the listeners, too, who are spreading the word about this AIA resolution, getting everybody behind it, and lots of people supporting, sending in their words of support to AE 9/11 Truth about this. So keep on working, keep on fighting. We are making a huge difference. Each step that we take, each time that we talk about this evidence, you are waking more people up, and we are protecting the future. And that's really what it's all about. All right, before I play my interview with Dave Meiswinkle, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that beginning now. And that is 10 seconds. David Meiswinkle is the president and founder of New Jersey 9/11 Aware. He's also a retired New Brunswick police officer and a United States Army veteran, and presently he's a criminal defense attorney. Along with Pam Senzi, he is the co-host of Quantum Matrix Radio, which airs here on No Lies Radio every Monday. You gotta check it out. Dave, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Andy, thank you very much for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Now, it's been a while since you've been on the show. We're always picking up new listeners, so tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Well, my background as far as sort of the activity that I'm involved with now goes back to my Rutgers college days as an undergraduate, where I was the president of Rutgers student body and was involved in a lot of, I think, progressive reform-type issues. One was coeducation. It was all male-dominated college at the time. Of course, this was during the war, so it was anti-war protests and things of that nature. I eventually went into the military for a few years. I was stationed in Germany, and I then was a administrator with the college. I used to coordinate handicap affairs at Rutgers. I set up the first handicap transportation system there, and also was instrumental in getting a student organization set up to represent handicapped students. And then what I thought I was going to do, Andy, was actually to go into the college arena totally. I was going to be an administrator and then maybe a teacher or professor. That's what I wanted to do, and philosophy was my area that I wanted to study, and I wanted to go into Dean of Students because as a student leader I had a lot of experience working with the Dean of Students. In fact, as a preceptor I did in the residence hall. But then I changed, maybe philosophically or as a social scientist. I thought I could learn much more about society if I went in a different direction. In other words, that seems to be so nice and comfortable, and still does in many ways. It's almost like being in a womb, extended womb. But I thought I would get to see what the life was about, and existentially I leaped into law enforcement, and prior to that I leaped into the Army. I leapt into the Army. So I was stationed, as I said, in Germany. I got the benefits of traveling all throughout Europe. I was trained to erect and launch the most powerful nuclear missile the Army had at that time, the Pershing, which now is phased out. And then I got out. I got a job with the Rutgers as a administrator, and for a part-time. And then I was in a philosophy program. Then decided to go and become a police officer, and I did. And I learned a heck of a lot there. And the department I was involved with was a very corrupt department. And instead of staying a short period of time, I ended up doing basically a career there. And I took on the machine that was there, a political machine, and ran a number of elections against and brought the FBI in, which worked with them for a couple of years. Then they put together a case based on a lot of the things I gave them, based on a newspaper we created called the New Brunswick Reporter and an organization called the Taxpayers and Tenants Association. So eventually some of these people did go to jail or were indicted, and I eventually took my family out of that city, still being a police officer in the nicer area, and got out of that kind of politics for a while. I was involved with the Reform Party. I was a secretary in the state. In fact, when Pat Buchanan was running as a candidate, I was his bodyguard for the times he came into New Jersey. So I got to meet him and talk to him a little bit. And I was also a delegate out in Long Beach in California when he was nominated as a presidential candidate, and actually went up and worked in a campaign in New Hampshire, which he won in the primary, Republican primary. So that was a little bit of experience. In 2011 was when I met Richard Gage. A friend of mine down in the Philadelphia area had told me about architects and engineers. I didn't know anything about them. And I was amazed at they were scientists, and they were doing the work really of a political activist, in that they were just saying, hey, scientifically, these are the facts, and this is what the results would be. And I love that because it couldn't be skewed in any way. It was truthful and objective. And I heard that Richard was up in Connecticut, and so I made the trip up there to meet him. He was at a university up there, college, and I got involved in the 2011, which was a 10-year anniversary, and eventually I was coordinating New Jersey for architects and engineers. Shortly thereafter, we decided in New Jersey, I thought that we had many connections that people didn't know about. For example, 681 victims were from New Jersey. The Twin Towers, or the WTC complex, was owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. 17 of the 21 counties in New Jersey had victims. The United Flight 93 came out of New Jersey that was supposedly crashed in Shanksville. The Anthrax attacks came out of Trenton, West Hamilton, West Windsor, Hamilton, and Princeton, New Jersey. And there was a terrorist cell, supposedly with Muhammad Atta, the alleged lead of the terrorists, in Paterson, New Jersey. So you had all these connections in New Jersey. So I can, I don't want to just keep on rambling here, but we did things to try and get legislators involved. We sent material to all the prosecutors, all the assembly people, that's 80 of them, and 40 state senators. We made a official complaint to the SCI. That's the State Committee Investigation. I compare it like the FBI, but it's not in any way like that. But we thought that was the proper place to start with asking for an investigation. I was advised by someone who actually does teach judges and lawyers, so I thought that was a good place to start, because that's where he advised me to start with the State Committee of Investigation to begin an investigation. They declined to do that. Some prosecutors did write back, didn't think it was their prerogative. Eventually, the Attorney General of New Jersey wrote back, and they said that they sent it to the U.S. Attorney, and that's, of course, the federal. We wanted to do something with the state. Now, I can talk at length about that, Andy, but I don't want to take the whole show up to talking about that stuff.
No, it's very interesting. I mean, I like listening to this. I like that people are actively doing something, are taking these kinds of measures, the things going on behind the scenes that many of our supporters may not even know are going on until they tune into shows like this one and hear you kind of give your progress report of what you've been up to since the last time that you've been on. I'm actually, while you're talking, calling up an article from AE 9/11 Truth. I don't know what year it's from because the date just says February 16th, but it says New Jersey group goes to college to make the case for 9/11 Truth, and it's talking about how you spoke at Rutgers University at your first ever 9/11 Truth College outreach event there. You want to talk about that a little bit?
You sure would like to, yes. That was in November. I think later in November we were up at Rutgers. And just to preface that, what we had done earlier, and this would be interesting, I think, with regards to how we did the rest of the conversation maybe unfolds. But in about a year and a half ago, we were just starting up New Jersey 9/11 Aware, and I wasn't very aware of a lot of stuff. So what I did is I crammed for about 4 months. Somehow I got the break in my law schedule, so that all my spare time, all I was doing was researching, educating myself, and building that website. That's nj911aware.org. And as a result of building that website up, I wanted to make a complaint. I wanted to get an investigation anywhere, but especially in New Jersey, because we had the jurisdiction. Seemed like that would make common sense. So I compiled, I did what you would call, it wasn't a complaint you would file like in a lawsuit. It was a complaint that the State Committee of Investigation had a little box that said, are you complaining as a citizen? So I said, no way can I put the complaint as a citizen in that little box. So I said, I will do this. I will document basically a 62-page complaint, which it came to be, have it notarized, and give it to these officials to basically say, hey, this is what you guys did. This is what you should have done. As far as witnesses should have been called, the documents that should have been subpoenaed, and suspects that should have been considered. Basically saying, we need a new investigation, and in doing a new investigation, look at some of the things that we're mentioning in this complaint. Anyway, one of the key things, Andy, and I've been when I said I was at Rutgers, I was as I said, the president of the student body. It was a totally different scene than you can imagine today. I remember when Kent State happened in Cambodia. I was just a sophomore at the time. I was really getting politically sensitized. And New Brunswick ended up being the center of all activity in the state of New Jersey, where colleges from Newark or Trenton or Princeton were all coming to the center of the state. So I've seen where education was really in the streets and not necessarily in the classrooms. And it was really, and that was over the war, illegal, unjust war. Well, today you have illegal, unjust wars too in Afghanistan, Iraq. You have that the insidious affair in Libya. You've got countries being toppled over. Iran is being threatened, etc. And of course, without going into analysis of that, and I don't think we want to do that right now. I mean, that calls into question what's going on in the campuses now. So we figured that let's get on the campuses and see if we can, feel the blood circulating within the student body, get a sense of their pulse, and see if there's something that can be organized here. I really believe they're an incredible wellspring of energy if it could be tapped. Now, what I've seen, this was in reference to Rutgers, that was in November. We were just in Douglas like a week ago. We're going to post something on that shortly. Douglas is an all-women's college. It's part of Rutgers University in New Jersey, across town from Rutgers College. And what we've seen in both places was, which was totally different from when I was a student, is that everybody seems to be plugged into something. When they walk around, I guess they have their iPhones on or their cell phones, or they're preoccupied already. They're listening to music, they're listening to shows. So when you try to engage a conversation, like maybe 70% of them seem to be preoccupied with something. And in a sense, it's kind of alarming because, one, it's probably not so good to be so dependent on technology, just to be plugged in like that. But two, it's like, hey, where are you? There's wars, like I said, all these wars. Back then, we had a war in Vietnam, and everyone was concerned about it. The biggest difference, Andy, and this is how you help out, and anyone that's in independent media helps out, is that at least back then, the press would cover the issues. The press would press or produce the pictures. They would publish the pictures so you could see the horror of war. Now, people they don't realize we're spending billions upon billions upon billions of dollars to basically kill people, subjugate people. A lot of it, probably most of it, based on the ruse of 9/11, that the official story is the truth. Now, what I've seen, and this is as a police officer and as an attorney, and using that background and basically having maybe more of a detached or objective viewpoint, and having immersed myself in the literature, which is voluminous, and since I did that complaint, continue to immerse myself, so the complaint really has to be redone and done better. I would say categorically, without a doubt, that, at least in my estimation, that the official government reports are not truthful whatsoever. Not truthful whatsoever. I underline it. Not truthful whatsoever. And that's alarming. You've got now, Andy, you've got some major issues that before the public. So some of these issues we were trying to talk to students the other day at Douglas College. And this is the H.R. 14 issue, which is an old issue from 2002, actually. It goes back to the Joint Congressional Inquiry done by the co-chair at that time, Senator Robert Graham, who was also a former governor of Florida. And in that report, there is 28 pages that was redacted or totally blacked out by President Bush, and that supposedly are the pages that detail, at least in part, the financing of the terror in the United States. So think about that. That's an incredible thing. You've got a detailed description of some of the involvement of the suspects involved or in the murder of 3,000 Americans, and was carried over to the murder of 1 million Iraqis, and I'm not sure how many hundreds of thousands of Afghanis. And you've got it blacked out by the President of the United States, and then you have President Obama claiming that he's going to declassify it and doesn't do it either. So now you've got Walter Jones, he's a Republican, I think Thomas Macy from Kentucky, Walter Jones from North Carolina, Macy from Kentucky, and Stephen Lynch from Massachusetts. And they are all congressmen. And now, here's the deal. If you want to look at these 28 pages and you're a congressman, you can. First, you've got to make sure you're cleared for it. because one of the congressmen tried to get it. They wouldn't let him because he didn't have the proper clearance. So they got to vet you really good, even though you're a congressman. And then when you go, my understanding is you're in a private room. You have a guard sitting right across from you. You can read it, the material. You cannot take notes. You cannot underline anything. And you cannot talk to anyone about the substance of what's in those reports. In other words, you can't tell anybody about who the suspects that killed 3,000 Americans are, at least who financed them. You can't do that. So there's now, the bill is called H.R. 14. Every congressman should demand to see that immediately, and there should be a vote to bring that to a disclosure, to the public, the American public, in the national interest. They keep it closed for whatever reason. Now, Tom Kaine was the chairman, and Lee Hamilton, the vice chairman of the 9/11 Commission. They even say there's nothing threatening in there. And Bob Graham, who was the co-chairman, as far as national security, Bob Graham was the co-chairman of the Joint Congressional Inquiry, he said the same thing. So now you have the guys who are on the top looking in, and they're saying, hey, there's nothing there harmful. So that's going to hurt national security, but it's going to give people a different perspective. What did Macy say from Kentucky? Here's the congressman, young guy. He sees it, and he says something to this extent. He says, I'm reading this. Every minute or so, every couple pages, I had to stop. Every couple pages, I had to stop for a couple minutes and rethink my whole conception of United States history. So shocking was it through that document. Now, he's probably much more conservative than a lot of people, and maybe that was a strain where it was maybe the other people might look at it and say, yeah, I knew it all the time. But this is a congressman who had the courage or the desire to be truthful to America and the Constitution, and he took the time to look at those pages. And now he's one of the sponsors of the bill, so he sees the importance. Now, in addition to that, Andy, this is something that really is important, and it just happened less than 2 weeks ago. This is Richard Lambert. Lambert was the head investigator of the FBI in the Anthrax, or the investigation into the anthrax attacks in the United States. So he's the top guy. He's a point man. His was his investigation. He was in the FBI 24 years. What most people don't know, he was a whistleblower while he was in the FBI, because the investigation kept on getting obstructed by people within the government. So he couldn't do a really good investigation. Anyway, after he left his job in the FBI, he got another job with the EPA. And then people tried to set him up and say he got it illegally because he was supposed to wait for a year, which wasn't correct. And then they put out this information that he was going to get indicted or be arrested. And he got blackballed in 70 other organizations. He tried to get a job, so he was blackballed. So he decided, I'll get back to these guys. And he filed a lawsuit based on a violation of different ethics. He sued the FBI, Robert Mueller, the Attorney General, and other people in organizations. But in his complaint, what he says, and this was so important, besides being obstructed, he says the fellow that was eventually the scientist who was fingered as the mailer and the culprit, Bruce Indens, and he was supposedly committed suicide before they could arrest him. I mean, the guy was under a lot of stress and committed suicide. And then basically the case was closed, that we got the killer, he killed himself, don't worry about it. Well, that's not the case, because what Lambert says is that there was exculpatory, which means evidence that would show the person's innocence or not guilt, and that the public was denied that evidence, and that he knew that. In other words, they blamed the man after his death for committing these crimes, and there was evidence to show that he wasn't guilty, all right? And that wasn't mentioned. That's very significant. Before Invence, there was a guy named Hatfield who was a scientist they blamed. Well, again, they got the wrong guy again, because he sued the federal government, got $4.3 million. So the bottom line, Andy, is that there is a connection now with the Anthrax attacks and 9/11, and people that are really up on that are Graham McQueen, Barbara Honecker, Barry Kissin, who's an attorney down in Washington D.C., and we've covered that too on No Lies Radio, produced by QuantumMatrixRadio.com with Pamela Sensei and myself. And what it appears is that the president of the United States was advised of anthrax on the day of 9/11. But even more disturbing, perhaps, was that there was a clip that we ran of a person who testified at one of these hearings they were having during that time. And he says this: he was running down the street for his life, and I think was ushered in a building while the smoke was coming, or the dust, the concrete pulverization, and all the other toxic stuff that was coming down. And there was an FBI guy in there who told them that the FBI was aware for some time that the buildings were going to come down. And he advised the guy to go to the hospital and get checked for anthrax. Now, for those that don't know, there wasn't an official anthrax attack for supposedly the letters being sent out for another week. And for those that don't know, the anthrax was timed with the incursion into Iraq, which seemed to be had already been planned, just like the incursion into Afghanistan even before 9/11. And with attacks on the two Democrats who were sort of holding up the Patriot bill, and that was Daxel and Leahy, Patrick Leahy and Thomas Daxel, both Democrats. And they received this anthrax, which came back eventually. They tried to blame Iraq on it. That's why we went to a war. Really think of this. We got bad information from our intelligence that the Iraqis and Saddam Hussein was responsible for this high-grade, bioweaponized super anthrax that was in such a powdery form and so minute and so sophisticated that it only comes in one or two areas in the world, being from the United States. All right, I think one of the factories or the labs is called Battelle, and but nevertheless, we went to war and we did some terrible things. So at least that clip we played on Quantum Matrix Radio, and when the whole story with Lambert we broke. Now, just to let you know, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about censorship, is that Pam Sensei had set up for us on Quantum Matrix Radio our own YouTube channel, because although we are on No Lies Radio, we want to have a YouTube channel too to promote the videos, let people get them easier and things of that nature. After that show, our channel was taken down. All right, within 2 days of that show, last show we did, that was like a week and a half ago. Now, this comes on the heels of a show we had with a few weeks before that with Rebecca Roth. And whether you know it or not, and if people go on our QuantumMatrixRadio.com, they can see the interview we had with Rebecca Roth and a article by Paul Sembrecca, who basically says that, he criticizes her too. Now, she's the darling in the 9/11 movement, and maybe she should justifiably be the darling, but she raised some really red flags to us, and we questioned her on it. And what happened was she was very obstinate and I can't speak, testy, maybe that's the word. And she claimed that we were the worst or most ignorant interviewers she's had, because everybody's basically giving her a free pass, it seems like, because some of the stuff that she says you want to hear or you think you believe it, and a lot of it is. But she said we were the most ignorant host she had and was going to leave the program if we continued. And all we're doing is asking simple questions like, she claims all the airplanes were into Westover, and, she can account for the flights that went into New York City, 175, but 93 and 77, that's a whole other question. And she misrepresents some of the statements from the stewardesses and interprets them in a different way, it seems like. But what really was egregious in a way was she went on an assault against David Ray Griffin because of the voice morphing theory or possibilities, And it wasn't even well, it's possible. It was categorically, no, it's the way I say it, or no way else.
That's why, I always stick to the controlled demolition because it's the thing we can prove. Now, you mentioned something earlier about the young people when you were at that college, how they're all plugged into something. And this is something that baffles me because you're bringing up a lot of things that we wouldn't have tolerated at least even 30 years ago. I mean, I've been watching the Iran-Contra hearings on C-SPAN's web archive just for kicks, and to hear some of these congressmen talk about how they can't tolerate the secrecy from the executive branch and they can't tolerate some of the overreach as they perceive it and all of this, it's just, where are these voices now? I mean, I remember this as a kid, hearing this stuff in the background of life, and you don't hear these voices anymore. Now you confront a congressman with some of this information, they act like George Costanza, trying to lie to somebody about some stupid nonsense, right? So how is it that our young people are becoming less rebellious? I mean, shouldn't we be becoming more conservative and stodgy and pro-establishment, and the young people becoming more rebellious? It seems that it's going in the opposite trend.
Well, what's fascinating is the table we had set up, that the volunteers were all people from the anti-war era, if you can believe it, my age. And they all knew the deal. So what's happened is that there's been an intentional dumbing down in our schools and in our society. What I mentioned before about the free press being free, it is not free. It's a corporate-controlled disinformation propaganda machine, period. You've got to go to alternative. Not to say they don't print some stories, and not to say like Rebecca Roth, most of her book might be accurate, totally. But there's disinformation there that won't allow you to see the total picture or see the truth. Or that's possible with her, but I will say that generally in the public arena with the newspapers, there are important articles that are left out. I used to talk to, I did a newspaper for a while, New Brunswick Reporter, and that was what brought the federal investigators into town. And I was asked to go up and brief the U.S. Attorney's Office at a few times over lunch. And I remember one FBI guy coming in, or a U.S. Attorney guy, and an FBI guy. He came in and says, "Hey, can we have this article you did on this thing that's going on in Atlantic City?" Because we were connecting the Atlantic City illegal operation with New Brunswick. And I said, sure, he could have the whole thing. We printed 15,000. We gave them to everybody in the city free of charge when it came out. So what I'm saying is we had to do back then, we had to do investigative journalism. The newspaper media, for the most part, doesn't do investigative journalism. And the point I was trying to make is I had guys who would come to me and tell me there was going to be a big story, they're going to break it. And then they had to come and say, listen, we had to deep six it. We can't go with it. We put it in the freezer. I said, well, how long is it going to stay in the freezer? He says, we don't know. Well, those stories never came out of the freezer. Now, just to give you a little clarification on what's going on in New Jersey, from the few experiences I had, when we did our 9/11 10th anniversary in New Jersey, we had about 6 or 7 spots. We had vigils set up. And the biggest vigil probably was set up in Middlesex County where I practice law. I don't live there, but I used to live there. And in the Middlesex County, 57 people were killed, just to give you an idea. So it had victims in Middlesex County. But other counties like Bergen County had 123, and Monmouth County had 122, and Hudson County had 11. So there was a lot of victims in 17 to 21 counties. Anyway, I had a friend of mine who was an editor in a local newspaper. And this newspaper used to be the biggest circulation in central New Jersey. It's gone down a lot since then. This shows you how they just sort of rotted out inside, and then how the internet's really picked it up, I guess, in a lot of ways. So I think they just are there to genuflect to their advertisers right now. But people don't know it. Basically, a paper is laid out around ads. I didn't know that at first, but you have to build a skeleton around the ads, and you fill it in with print because that's what sells and that's where you make your money. Anyway, he told me without a doubt he carried the whole thing. I was talking I got up on a soapbox. I had those old antique wooden crates, soda crates from the 1930s. That was really cool, and I got up on top of it and I talked for about at least 20 minutes. And right in front of the Middlesex County courthouse, and these judges are walking out, and prosecutors and cops are around, and whatever, it was around at lunchtime. And we did that for half an hour almost. Well, the whole show was half an hour. We had a videographer there. So I thought, well, good. Rutgers came there, so they covered it. I saw them there, and they asked me questions. And my guy was there. I figured, well, he's going to give art. He's not only the editor, but he's a reporter too. And so I thought, well, this is great. But he come back to me later, and he says, well, Dave, I couldn't do the article yet. He kept on stalling out, and then finally said, listen, my boss, now he's an editor, so his boss above him, I guess, editor-in-chief, said that we can't go with the article. We can't cover what he's saying. You just did a dedication, 30-minute dedication to the victims, 57 victims. We read their roll call, all their names, and where they lived and all that stuff, and their age when they died, where they worked. And we had one of the women read that whole litany of names at the end of the our little 30-minute video, and they could not put that in. They had to put some fluff in it. That's what he told me. They want some fluff. So they don't want anybody to probe into 9/11 the way it's supposed to be. They even set up in New Brunswick a center. It's like a 9/11 center. So I was excited when I first did this. Was a couple years ago. And somebody reminded me the other day. They said, there's a center in New Brunswick. And I said, oh, I forgot about that. I said, yeah. But I went in there to talk to the people, the director. They bought the official story, lines away from the whole official story. They bought it. And I just said, wow, what is this? Some kind of front, for the, it's like when you get into the argument over the look at the 9/11 museum and how that distorts the reality or the truth. You have to go to Barbara Honecker's virtual museum tour to get a more balanced perspective as to, what really went on in 9/11. So going back to what we've seen at the colleges and what the college kids are, we actually did get an article in the paper of the Targum last time. And we advised them we were going to be over Douglas, but nobody covered us. The college reporters didn't cover us. And, the issue is a hot issue that people stay away from, because what it does, Andy, to me, is really the most important issue that United States citizens can deal with right now if they have the courage to look at it, because it opens the door up to an entire different world, another paradigm. It exposes a cabal of evil people and organizations that are intent on writing history in a way that benefits only a select few, and the rest are, to them, just not necessary. They're useless feeders. They will use people as ever they want to.
Well, it takes a certain kind of personality to do this kind of thing and to orchestrate such a cover-up. And what I find, I haven't broke the story yet. It's going to be broken, I think, our bulletin coming out. But, we were talking about the young people, the college students, and we're talking about how media is afraid of covering this. We had somebody donate some money, wanted to do some advertising in some of the big Ivy League schools. And so I headed up this project, and I contacted the newspapers at these schools. It was Yale, Dartmouth, Harvard, Cornell, and we ended up later adding University of Virginia. But the big advertising plan was simply take our brochure and have them as inserts in the student newspapers, which they advertise in their media kits. Now, two of the universities, Yale and Dartmouth, said flat out, no, we're not going to deal with this issue. One of them told me that they feared the controversy, and they were kind of sympathetic, the woman I talked to, but they didn't want to deal with the controversy. Cornell actually did run it, to their credit, but the Harvard Crimson, they initially agreed to it, and we had a contract with them, and then they backed out. Their president, and I'm not sure if they mean the university president or some other kind of president, but their president came in and vetoed the decision and backed out of the contract. They wouldn't run the inserts.
Well, that's fascinating. See, we're going to do something like that as soon as we get a little money together, and we're going to take some ads out. Now the school year is done, so we'll probably have to wait till September. In the Rutgers Targum, we had a circulation 35,000. Now they did an article on you have a picture of me there at the tables, and when we're passing literature out, and that is a normal circulation, 35,000 students. But what they did, which I didn't like, is because I was famous or infamous when I was back in my undergraduate days, they concentrated on that more than what we wanted to do on the 9/11 stuff. that was the main issue that we were on campus for, not my past. So they glorified that in my past, but not so much the issue. But, any news on this issue is better than no news, I think, because at least people will start probing. Now, let me tell you what happened the other day, because this affects us, as of yesterday, No Lies Radio. We do a show. But what happened, I told you that our YouTube account was totally taken down. They said totally, and Pam, since they tried to get an explanation, they said they sent her one. They never have yet. They haven't told her why it's been taken down. So we tried to record a show the other day with someone who was not really, because a lot of our shows are 9/11 related or things like that. But we want to go in a more quantum spiritual way too, because we think that creates more of a positive feeling, and we want to exercise, I guess, our right brain more than our left brain in that regard. So we had a hypnotherapist, a healer, etc. That would be kind of interesting and sort of a segue into other kind of programs like that. Anyway, I introduced the show this time, and I introduced Pam, and I introduced our guest reading the bio. And when we were taping, it was cut off. So it's never happened before. So, Jesus, everybody was confused because we were on these conference lines. So we got back together, so let's do it again. Did the same thing again, and all of a sudden we're cut off. I said, holy cows. So we do it again. The third time, cut off. We couldn't do our show. In other words, we have a conference call situation which we think is secure, and we were cut off for the first time. Now, it's just, is it a coincidence that the YouTube channel was taken down and within a few days we couldn't even do our conference call line? We don't know that, okay? We don't know that for sure. But we'll look into it. But what we were talking about, Andy, and we were doing some research in it, and you probably can talk about that. Sure, I know you can, if you want to. We were looking at the different things that have been taken down, like James Corbett's stuff. He's just made a video, a YouTube or a blog, a short one too, very good. It's only like 9 minutes, where he claims that his stuff is being taken down and censored, and that Luke Radowski, who was famous in the 9/11 We Are Change, his stuff being taken down, antiwar.com stuff being taken down, we are Quantum Matrix Radio's stuff being taken down. Because what happens now, Andy, this is so important. We become reliant on this, the computer system and the internet. I remember as a police officer when some years ago they were saying they were going to go computerize all the records, and there's like thousands, maybe millions of police records. Everything you do reports all the time. I said, they'll never do that. How are they going to do that? It's going to take forever. Well, within a short period of time, it's between a year and 2 years, I think it was done. I couldn't believe it. So everything was on a computer. And I'm saying we're sort of totally dependent. Now, we talk about free speech. And the question is, what responsibility does Google, YouTube, Facebook have? And is it a quasi-public responsibility? In other words, do they act sort of like a surrogate state when they do censorship? And should they be obligated to the same standard as a government agency? Because it seems like if the NSA is so involved in the politics of free speech, well, maybe, and they're using these let's call them organs of free speech, Facebook, YouTube, Google, then we've got a real big problem without an alternative.
Well, what you see happening is not about saying you have to do something, that you have to use Google, you have to use Facebook. Like, for instance, I've used this example before, and like Facebook, I don't have a personal Facebook. Excuse me. I don't have a personal Facebook. It's just I don't really get into it and don't care about that stuff. But I've always often mused about whether or not, like, you take two people, Andy and Bruce, make up somebody, and all things being equal between me and this other person, we're going up for a job, and an employer, a potential employer, can look at these two prospective employees and say, okay, well, Andy doesn't have a Facebook, but Bruce does, and I've looked at Bruce's Facebook, and there's nothing all that controversial or scary about his personal life, so I'm going to go with the safe choice and go with Bruce, because Andy's sort of a wild card here. And so that's how I see some of these things being enforced. I mean, you go, like, I once applied for a job at, I think it was Target, Maybe it was Target. I forgot which. Yeah, I think it was, or maybe JCPenney's, one of these chain stores years ago. And you have to take a computer test. You have to go through all of these hoops and answer a personality test for essentially just doing a job where you're ringing up a cash register. You know, they do these personality tests and try to determine what kind of bird you are. I was actually at a job where they had to determine what kind of bird you were. And it's like, okay, the reality is everybody's a leader in certain circumstances. Everybody's a follower in other circumstances. It varies, and you can't really box people into these little categories. It's just not how human personalities work, you know. But people that come up with these systems are probably making a lot of money selling this to these corporations. I think there's a real danger in our society just stepping out of 9/11 for a minute. There's a real danger in our society thinking of people as little chess pieces they can move around on a board, or as little classified numbers that they can assess them with. And so, yeah, I mean, as we become more reliant on these things, that these other options get taken away, so that it doesn't become mandated that you have to have a Facebook by government. It just becomes kind of a social norm, and employers and people that you have to depend on for your livelihood start kind of nudging you in the direction of having these things. That's something that I'm afraid of happening.
Well, I agree with you. The whole society is being psychologically profiled. That's evident in a book called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, where they basically document that it was a publication that was left in an IBM computer. It wasn't supposed to be for the public to necessarily view it, but basically it showed the whole plan of basically putting servitude in the people and using the computerization to help do that. You know, I forgot to mention to you that when we sent that complaint to all those legislators in New Jersey asking for a new investigation in New Jersey because we thought it had legal connection, we also sent it to 250 media in the New Jersey area. And I was going on vacation at that time, and I didn't have a computer with me. And right before I left, I remember one of the assembly people, but I didn't remember his name, telling me, thanking for the correspondence, and that they would get back to me. And I was looking forward to it. So when I got back, I went to access my email, and the whole email was shut down. Everything we had on there was shut down. You know, we had a PayPal on there. We had correspondence. So anybody like that legislator that wanted to contact us couldn't. So I never got an explanation, although I tried many times. From email was Gmail, was Google, all right? I tried many times to get an explanation, and they wouldn't. And then about 4 months later, they said, if you had gotten in touch with us earlier, we could have, located the problem or something. I could always believe that, but they actually did. So that just shows that the control they have in the media. The same thing happened. Princeton Packet actually contacted us. We actually got a call. So they were one of the many news media that got the message. They called, and they wanted to do an interview. So myself and our treasurer, who used to work on Wall Street, he's a certified public accountant, and we talked for an hour and a half with this fellow at a local restaurant, and he said he's going to give us a good article. Fantastic. He was very supportive. He says, first I got to call the governor's office and get their side. No problem. Make a better story. Sure, a balanced story, right? Well, no story ever developed. we don't get a story on 9/11. All right, it's a taboo topic, which means that, like with Bogue Rights, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was one of the most decorated Vietnam War veterans, ran for president of the United States. He says when you're taking flak, you're over the target. When you're taking flak, you're over the target. So if they're shutting you down, that means you must be over the target. And what the target is truth. That's what we want. We want to expose the truth. So anytime that happens, that raises a red flag for me when I see these organizations being censored or shut down on whatever issue. And first thing I'll ask is, did they do something wrong, and what did they do? All right, what did they do wrong? Explain it. And if they did something wrong, did it merit being shut down, or is this really selective enforcement based on the political content of the matter? So it raises a lot of important questions, Andy. The whole monopoly of information. And, of course, there's a difference between information and knowledge. You know, knowledge is something that transcends the contemporary political skewing of events or whatever. But at least the information allows you to do, though, some kind of allows you to chart a path and move towards it. But everything is being controlled now by the worse and worse the corporations. Right now, there's a big issue, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is like a super sized NAFTA, I understand, or a NAFTA on steroids. That's not the issue no longer. Even though so many years ago the issue was corporations want to have citizenship so they can, give unlimited contributions to candidates, which now they allow. All right, the Supreme Court is not representing the people. The Supreme Court's decisions are actually unconstitutional. I'd say that as an attorney, in my opinion, anyway. But now, what they want, they're looking at citizenship, the corporations. They want nationhood. So this Trans-Pacific Partnership is tied up to nationhood. So these same corporations, the international financiers that control the corporations, the bigger banks, the giant banks and the families that run those banks, if you trace everything back to 9/11, all the way back to the incident, and then have a progression, you're going to see some connections that were really surprising if there's a proper investigation. And that's why they don't allow the proper investigation. Because if you got the true suspects, that's why they've not allowed it, then you will change the whole complexion of the world, not just the United States. You can have a world of abundance, like Buckminster Fuller said. He was a futurist, a scientist, an inventor, a genius. He said if you arrange the natural resources properly, everyone could live not like billionaires, not like millionaires, but like billionaires, if you arranged it properly. So what happened now is we're getting to an artificial scarcity of everything, yet the means of production are set up where we could have total abundance. There should not be poor people anywhere. There should not be people anywhere that need help, etc. And there's a connection that hasn't been forged yet between the 9/11 truth movement and the anti-war movement, which some people are reticent to cross the bridge. But if you analyze the roots of both, you're going to see the same culprits are there. And you could trace it back in history, certainly to the Kennedy assassination, certainly to those who were behind the Vietnam War, the ones behind Iran-Contra, that type of mentality, that type of character. Even those families still are intact, and some of the same characters are still involved. So there's a pattern there. And people that actually get into the literature, and not getting through the mainstream media, but if you get into the literature, you'll see that without a doubt, there's a pattern. You can see it. And if there was an investigator, or not investigator, but a prosecutor, or attorney general, or U.S. attorney that had the courage and the patriotism, they could put a really good indictment against at least some of the people at the level that we are familiar with. Again, there's people behind those people. So the people you think are powerful really aren't powerful. They're front people for more powerful people who are actually front people for even more powerful people in interest. But there is an end to that chain somewhere. Of course, we don't even get into the first base because we're still believing, or some people in the theories that the government has given it, called the official 9/11 theories, both on the collapse of the Trade Center and all the incidents of the Pentagon and the Shanksville, and also on the Anthrax. Okay, as I said before, I don't believe any of that as being truthful. I believe that the investigation has never been done. That if it's done right, I'd love to be part of it in some way to serve it as an investigator or even a prosecutor, if that would ever be honored to do that. But that would that has to go forward if people are going to get the truth. And if it doesn't, if we still have just people all plugged in, as we were talking about before, that's not a good situation. But here's the thing. I talked to a student at Douglas, and the person said, because I was saying, I raised the question. So you guys all seem like you're plugged into something. You're not, not on you don't know. And he said, no, we know what's going on. Which was like, I was saying that they know what's going on. I was thinking, are they scared? or are they just, they're just waiting to build up? It's like steam. All of a sudden has to be let out. Is that what's happening? Everyone knows that there's a problem in the country. It's been totally different in the orientation we're going. We're going on a suicide path with these leaders here. We know that. We know that the standard of living has dramatically dropped in the United States in the high character categories with health and education, things like that, is one on the bottom. What we are is number one in prisons, number one in drug addicts, and number one in weapons. That's what we have. 50% of our budget from our income taxes goes to pay the military-industrial complex, which former President Eisenhower warned us about many years ago. So who is that serving? That's the question. Is that serving us? It's creating an empire for who?
Well, we're going to have to leave it there because we are actually out of time right now. But I want to thank you, Dave, for coming on the show. Keep us updated on New Jersey 9/11 Aware again, folks. That is New Jersey, or Jersey 9/11aware.org, is it? Did anyone get the website right?
That's it. It's NJ911aware.org. .org.
And we're going to link it up in the description for this show. We're going to keep up on what you guys are doing. And, of course, folks, you can listen to Quantum Matrix Radio every Monday. What time is it on?
It's on noontime on Monday, quantummatrixradio.com. And it's on No Lies Radio. And hopefully we'll get a YouTube channel again. I don't know how that's going to work. We'll have another YouTube channel too, but you can access it through our website. We've always posted on the website too. It's quantummatrixradio.com.
There you go. You can always turn it on at lunchtime too at work and listen to it while you eating your lunch and enjoying the food there. But Dave Meiswinkle, thank you so much for coming on 9/11 Freefall. This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.